Hi, everyone. My name is Marco Tischler. I am a group product manager at ThousandEyes. And today I'm going to talk to you about ThousandEyes and something what we call digital experience assurance, which kind of encompasses everything that we do as ThousandEyes and also as it pertains to Cisco and integrations that we've been doing with Cisco. This week, we're doing some announcements with regards to how we're expanding the data set that helps us ensure a digital experience across any network, any client, to any application. So quick agenda. So I'll do a quick intro to ThousandEyes, who we are, what we do, what do we mean by digital experience assurance, what we're announcing this week. And I want to do a couple of demos of the three items we're specifically focusing on this week. And the previous presenter talked about Cisco's secure access solution. So I also want to quickly spend some time on talking about how we integrate with Cisco's secure access offering as well. So quickly on ThousandEyes, historically what we've been tasked with doing is understanding and providing the visibility into the networks that you don't control, meaning the internet, the cloud, anything lying outside of the enterprise perimeter. From the user perspective, this is how they perceive connectivity. So you have some sort of a device, headless device, user device, and they need to connect to a resource. And they don't see any of the complexity that lies between the 2 points of connectivity. So you have your service is either working or it's not working, and you have your device and it's connecting to the network in order to consume the service. I think we all know that it's a little bit more complicated than that. And when you look at how the real connectivity actually looks like, you're traversing different types of networks. You're traversing different paths at different points in time. You have different levels of visibility into each of those intermediate networks, into each of these nodes, and at each of these nodes, you have to deal with multiple layers. So the complexity of how a user accesses an application or a resource today is very, very complex. And it breaks in so many fabulous ways. And that's what kind of drove our founders when they founded ThousandEyes, just understand all the interesting ways in which internet and networking breaks. And we want to provide the visibility into what is going wrong, where the problem is, and then from there, help you establish the root cause. And once you understand the root cause, there's a higher chance you'll be able to fix the problem quicker. And this is irregardless of if we're talking about the device itself. Sometimes the problem happens even before you access the networking resource. High CPU on a device, high memory utilization on a device. So it could be related to the client device itself. Then we have the access networks, wired, wireless connectivity, all the resources and services required to actually be able to access the network, DNS, DHCP, radio servers if you're dealing with any sort of authentication. And then you get from your local area networks, from the networks that you control, you have some control of, into the network that you don't control. So you get to your WAN and internet and internet transport. And there, we provide the visibility into every single node that the communication has to traverse, all the way into where the host that's hosting the application is, whether that's in a data center somewhere on a physical server, or in a hyperscaler environment, an EC2 instance, for an example, or a Kubernetes cluster. And our aim is to provide this end-to-end visibility from the network interface of the user device or the client device that's accessing the network, and across this complex and dynamic network path, all the way to where the application is hosted. So the host is either a virtual or a physical, and the virtual or a physical NIC that connected to the network. So this is who we are, and this is what we do. When we're talking about digital experience assurance, so we talk about assuring this path. And historically, the way we've done that is by means of synthetic testing. So ThousandEyes, what we do is we have different flavors of agents. Some of them are hosted in the cloud, so they're managed by us. And we provide those so you can orchestrate tasks towards different resources. And roughly, we're dealing with like two types of testing. One is the outside looking in paradigm, where you use the cloud vantage points to test the resources that our customers are hosting, our applications, for example. And we have multiple points of presence across the globe. And our customers can use those as proxy metric of how does the connectivity look like to their application from customers that are distributed across the globe. On the flip side, we have the inside looking out methodology, where our customers can host the agent in their environment. We call those enterprise agents, which essentially is the same agent. It's just the difference in hosting. And you can orchestrate tasks to the infrastructure, to the private infrastructure, or from the what we call the inside looking out methodology, which is typically testing SaaS services that employees of a typical company have to use. However, when it comes to assuring this end-to-end path, synthetics is just one part of the story. And we're realizing that we need to consume other data points to be able to be more precise, to give more context. And I think context is what we really are after. So when our outcome that we deliver is reduced mean time to resolution. So reduced mean time to resolution requires very, very specific context, the right data points at the right point in time for our customers to be able to troubleshoot network issues. And with that in mind, when we're talking about digital experience assurance, we're talking about three pillars of functionality. One is end-to-end visibility. End-to-end visibility means do I even have the right coverage and the right data points so I can troubleshoot this path end-to-end? And our goal is to do this for any user, any application, any network that you might be traversing. The second one is intelligence. There's a lot of data involved in this complex communication, and we kind of don't want to see the future where our customers have to go in and they have to correlate the data manually, look at thousands of time series data sets. And we as humans are also, we're not good at processing and correlating large amounts of time series data, and we're also prone to errors. So we want to help that, and we leverage intelligence, machine learning, statistical learning, and other methods to derive insights and try to aggregate things together so that we can essentially do autocorrelation at scale. So again, the user can be put in the right context when they are troubleshooting. As opposed to trying to find needles in the haystack. So we like to say that we help finding those needles in the haystack. And finally, closed loop operations or closed loop actions. In some cases, so for networks that you do not control, the appropriate action is probably picking up the phone and calling somebody. So maybe it's your last mile service provider, a transit ISP, maybe it's your hyperscaler provider. So for the networks that you don't control, probably there's a protocol you have to follow, which involves getting somebody on the phone. But for the networks that you do control, we want to focus on implementing closed loop actions so that if we do find a problem and if we have a high confidence of understanding what the root cause is, how do we make it go away? One example of that is what we've done with Cisco's Catalyst SD-WAN, that it actually utilizes ThousandEyes to predict issues on the network. And when we did our research, we found that roughly about 5% of all the interfaces that we observed across Cisco's SD-WAN deployment, 5% of those interfaces in a 30-day period are exposed to brownout events. And because they have a historical pattern to them, we were able to predict those events. And for those 5% of interfaces across a 30-day period, we're able to issue recommendations that say, well, if you have two interfaces available in your network policy, maybe using one instead of the other before the degradations happen will help you avoid the problem. And that's an example of closed loop actions that we want to help drive. And we see ThousandEyes as providing the signal for these actions, and then the domain controller on the other end kind of closes the loop and implements the corrective action. So the three announcements I was alluding to at Cisco Live this week, one is what we call ThousandEyes Cloud Insights. And it goes into that right path of visibility that I was mentioning in the beginning, which is how do I understand what's happening beyond the front door of the cloud provider or the hyperscaler. So after I hit my global accelerator, what's happening inside of the VPC itself, and how do the changes in there, either in traffic patterns or configuration, how do they affect the digital experience as perceived by the users? So maybe somebody did a configuration change that started rejecting some of the traffic, or inadvertently increase the traffic flow, or where the traffic is going. So we want to help you correlate how does that affect your users. The other announcement is what we call ThousandEyes Traffic Insights. And it essentially brings flow information from routers into the context of ThousandEyes, so you can cross-correlate with synthetics. And we're seeing the demand for this from two different perspectives. One is that a synthetic test will be able to pinpoint the problem and tell you if there is a problem and where it's breaking, but it doesn't give you the insight into the actual user impact. So in some cases, maybe your synthetic test is degrading, but there's nobody on site using that application at that point in time, which probably means it's a less important issue compared to the same problem manifesting itself when thousands of users are trying to access that resource from that same site. So that's why we're bringing the context of traffic into ThousandEyes to be able to understand, okay, how many users are actually trying to access the resource that is not available, or that the connectivity to that resource is being degraded. And on the flip side is, do the changes in the traffic pattern itself, are they contributing or causing the issue in the first place? So is a node in the network that you own, is it becoming congested? Is a sudden surge of traffic contributing to the problem or the degradation itself? And bringing that context into ThousandEyes helps with that reduced mean time to resolution. And finally, we have what we call shared cross-domain context, and we've implemented this together with Meraki, which essentially implements bidirectional data exchange between Meraki and ThousandEyes. And where this is important is if you're troubleshooting client-specific issues, at some point you might be wondering, well, is it the infrastructure that's causing the problem? Is it the client that's causing the problem, or it's something else? And you want to have that context of the proverbial, how does the client see the network and how does the infrastructure see the client, and try to decide quickly, okay, where do I need to go when I'm troubleshooting? So we want to bring that context from the context of the client into the Meraki dashboard, the context of the infrastructure into ThousandEyes, and also when you're using synthetic tests, bring synthetic tests into the Meraki dashboard so you can have not just client health, infrastructure health, but also application health as it's actually being tested at that point in time from a ThousandEyes agent. In terms of existing integrations we've done within Cisco, so our agents run on a variety of different platforms, Catalyst switches, ISR routers, Nexus switches, Meraki MX, and we also support what we call the endpoint agent that's running on Room OS or WebEx devices. So you can test from specifically for call and collaboration troubleshooting, you can test from the perspective of the endpoint that's actually making the call or participating in the call. And the purpose of this is really to provide these different vantage points that you might need to be able to test as close to the user as possible. So either the closest thing to the user we can think of is running on the actual user device. That's what we use the agent called the endpoint agent for. Or you test from a perspective, you put an vantage point somewhere in your infrastructure, on a switch, on a router, on a WebEx device, and that kind of gives you the vantage point. Okay, how do I look at this across my infrastructure from different vantage points? And the ultimate goal of this is really to just provide more visibility and control, because what we're observing is the visibility, but also control is shifting. There's less and less control that customers have in an enterprise environment, because we're seeing this move that the data center is moving to the cloud. The application stack that was normally running on top of servers in a data center is now implemented as a SaaS with multiple API dependencies, multi-cloud deployments, and the office is no longer a centralized place. It's just highly distributed. So people are working from home, they're mobile, they're on the go. So we have all these different types of connectivity where people are when they're accessing the resources that they need. And finally, the network itself is becoming distributed. We're seeing a move away from typical MPLS type of connectivity into more SD-WAN and using the internet or the broadband connectivity across the internet, that you're using that as your WAN. And it requires deeper visibility into what's actually going on if you want to troubleshoot it. And finally, the digital experience themselves are not created in silos. There's interdependencies between all these different layers, and it all has to function. And unfortunately, it also breaks at some time. So to be able to troubleshoot this mesh of interconnectivity, we've introduced digital experience assurance. I mentioned, so it's just as an example, I mentioned Cisco Secure Access and what we do in that space. So any SASE environment introduces an additional level of complexity. Because now you have a SASE cloud. In that cloud, you have multiple services which you have to traverse, which may or may not contribute to issues. Or at least what you want to do, you want to rule it out as a potential cause of issues. And there's so many different points where this could go wrong. So it could be the Wi-Fi. It could be the local ISP. It could be the home network, the router, the CPE, depending on where the router is. It could be the SASE provider. And then it could be the interconnectivity between the SASE provider or wherever your application is. It could be the private app in a data center. It could be an application on the internet. And essentially, we want to provide visibility in all of this. So how do you determine where things are breaking really, really quickly and essentially rule out the things you have control of and get a hold of the point of control that will help you kind of fix the problem altogether. So with that, I'd like to dive into a few demos and show you some of the things we've been working on. So the first one is ThousandEyes Cloud Insights. So essentially what we're doing is we're complementing our synthetic data set with the data that we extract from AWS. This includes VPC flow logs and includes the inventory from the AWS itself. It could span multiple accounts, VPCs, regions. It's really up to the customer on how they want to configure that. And then we also correlated that with configuration changes that happen in that environment. So to show you how that looks like. So this is our Cloud Insights. I'm just going to have to refresh this real quick. And from a top level, you have all the flow data that is available in this particular environment. You can slice it in different ways. You can quickly, visually check for any anomalies, surges, drops of data, and then you can slice this in terms of who are my top talkers by regions, VPCs, subnets, AWS tags. There's different ways of slicing it. So if I go to accounts, I'm going to see, okay, who are my top talkers in terms of accounts? Who's my top consumer? And where's the traffic coming from? And this kind of gives you like a top level overview, but you really want to start massaging this data. And maybe you want to see how does the traffic flow between regions? So where's my traffic going from US East to US West? Who are my top consumers in terms of region? Where's my inter-regional traffic? Where are the highest volumes? And then you can break that down into VPCs, availability zones, subnets, and really understand, where is the traffic flowing? And also, how does it change? Because the changes is probably what you're looking for and what's important. So you can see the changes over time. And you can explore this in a graphical representation as well. So you can have this Sankey diagram that organizes this top to bottom and allows you to visually quickly explore, where are the flows going, where are they coming from, or how they're changing in terms of volume and or destinations. So one of the things I wanted to show was that these changes, they might correlate with configuration changes. So that's why we have events in here. And the events are essentially changes to the configuration. So what might be happening is when you see a change in the traffic pattern, it happens to temporarily coincide with a configuration change. And then we basically do a diff on the configuration changes. So what changed this time that might be causing the change in the behavior that you're seeing? The very similar concept is what we do with traffic insights. And traffic insights essentially allows our enterprise agents to become NetFlow collectors. So you can orchestrate NetFlow export from your switches, routers, or access points if they support it. And our enterprise agents then encrypt and send this NetFlow data to ThousandEyes platform. And one of the use cases that we have is I have an enterprise agent in here that is doing synthetic testing from, what you'd call a branch location to a data center where we host an application. And you quickly see that these tests are intermittently not performing well. So not only is the page load time increasing, you also have intermittent points of the application not being reachable. So when we zoom on this, and when you go down to the network layer, we see that this is my agent on the left-hand side. It's testing towards the server on the right-hand side, which happens to be in my data center. And in between, I have all these routers. And when I go to a point where the test is detecting loss, I can see that there's one router that we see that is contributing to the forwarding loss, and it has a forwarding loss of 50%. And at this point, okay, we know where the problem is, but we can't quite contextualize it in terms of impact and root cause. And one of the things we can do now is, because we have flow information available, we can switch into the flow views. And this puts me into the context of this particular router and this particular destination. So the destination I was testing to, which tells me, okay, how many other users were trying to access this resource at this same point in time? And this gives me the sense of impact. So what's the impact? The impact in this case is 10 users, because we have 10 conversations. But then the question becomes, what else is happening on this router? So if I zoom out and remove the destination and look at all the conversations, I quickly see that there's a large amount of conversations that are classified as MS update with high total throughput, which leads me to believe that if I aggregate this by applications, the root cause of the issue might be the fact that there's a large MS update happening at this point in time. And if I go after the spike or before the spike, I see that Microsoft update is not there. So this kind of helps with that increased context and situational awareness of what is happening and what might be causing the problem in the first place. And similarly to Cloud Insights, you can then, you don't have to stay in this context. You can start exploring this traffic top-down and understanding what's going on, where is it going, and so on. So these were the Insights demos. And I'd like to show you what we're doing together with Meraki. So this is the Meraki dashboard. And I mentioned the bidirectional data exchange, and we're doing this in two ways. One is Meraki consumes data from ThousandEyes synthetic tests in order to be able to populate what we call the assurance dashboard. And the application portion of the assurance dashboard is provided by ThousandEyes synthetic tests. So you have your network health score that comprises of clients, network infrastructure, but then also application performance. And when we go into the application performance part, we see that Office 365 is underperforming. And you look at this from the perspective of pure connectivity versus the application performance and response times. We see that the application is not reachable for 60 clients. And when we look at internet connectivity itself, we see that we have high loss. So this tells us that for this particular location, we're experiencing high loss, which is preventing access to Office 365, and it's affecting 60 different clients. And what I can do from here is I can then, I want to troubleshoot this, obviously. I want to understand what's going on. So I can switch into the context of ThousandEyes. And this is going to bring me to that specific test, to that specific context, to that specific time. And then I can observe the behavior of the test, loss, latency, jitter. And then I can also switch into my network path visualization and see, so what was happening on my network path? So this is the location where we're testing from. And we see that we have a few nodes as we're traversing the path towards Office 365 where we're experiencing loss. So these are then the nodes that are essentially contributing to the issue. And depending on where these nodes are, so if the nodes are in your enterprise environment, you might be able to do something about it. If they're outside, more towards either Microsoft or one of the transient ISPs, you have a call to make. So this is one example of this bidirectional data exchange. And I wanted to show you another one. So give me 1 second. So this is the endpoint agent. The endpoint agent sits on a user's device, and there's kind of two different types of connectivity. One is hybrid work, or where people are working from home, and in that environment, you don't really know much about the network. Everything you can learn from the perspective of the device itself, because there's no other point of control. In an enterprise environment, that client will also be present in your infrastructure. So from a network monitoring system, you will actually know more about it than you do in a home environment. So when we are in an enterprise environment or in the office, the question then becomes, how do we troubleshoot it, and how do we leverage this dual view of how does the client see the network, but then how does the network see the client? So an example I have down here is, so I have a client that's connected to our corporate SSID, and I have all this information about the agent itself. It's good, so we have a green tick. Nothing is wrong on the agent itself. We have the local network connectivity, which encompasses both layer 2 and layer 3. So how's the wireless performing, but also how's the layer 3 connectivity to the gateway that's providing my internet access. How's the internet access itself as I traverse to my applications, and then how's the application performance in terms of loss, latency, jitter, time to first byte, and any individual errors. So, but you might have noticed when I was looking at this at the local network layer, there is the access point section, and this access point section is actually from Meraki. So we're observing this client at this particular point in time, and we're looking at the wireless network, both from the perspective of how does the client see it. So how does the client see the network? How does the client see connectivity, both from the perspective of RSSI, retransmits, and then layer 3 metrics like loss, latency, and jitter towards the default gateway. And then also, what's the access points kind of standpoint? And we plan to expand some of these metrics to aid the troubleshooting further. Today we have number of connected clients, we have the network name, location, and application name. And how does this relate to reducing of MTTR, mean time to resolution, is that the segment visualization helps somebody in a service desk environment that might not be a networking expert to interpret the complex data set that we have behind all of this. And essentially, each of these segments, we call these like segment views, is connected to either a department or a person that would be responsible for that part of the network. So if you're a service desk engineer, this kind of tells you who I need to escalate to. So if I see a red mark in one of these segments, I need to talk to that team. And secondly, if you are one of those teams and your responsibility happens to be the local wireless LAN or LAN, you get this context of which access point was the user connected to. And if you want to troubleshoot further, you can then cross-lodge back into Meraki and troubleshoot from the perspective of Meraki, and then going back and forth between the two. So this is our Meraki integration, or bidirectional data exchange, for what we call cross-domain context. So, 1 second, just going back. So I quickly demoed the traffic insights. The idea here really is to leverage and provide the flow visibility and synthetics from a single tool and correlate everything in a same place. The reason why also that's important is because in some cases when you're using multiple tools, the way things are measured are vastly different. And the way the data is aggregated might be vastly different as well. So when you try to correlate, you actually see that you're comparing maybe a measurement with a 1-minute frequency with an aggregate of maybe a 30-minute buckets. And those two will not correlate because one of the time series is highly aggregated, and maybe any of the peaks or spikes are flattened out. So it's really important not just that you have the data, but also how you get the data and how you measure. And this is we see that as very important when it comes to providing context. And we talked about shared domain. So with Meraki, it's really about having that drill down whenever you need it and meeting the users where they are. Either they're coming at it from an infrastructure perspective or they're coming at it from a client perspective. The information that they need to troubleshoot should really be available where they are and where they are starting their workflow. So that's what we want to provide. So that's what I kind of had to present. Thank you very much. And I guess, is there any questions that I can answer?
What does licensing look like for the new features as opposed to the historical, like per block of tests per month?
So the endpoint agent or the cross-domain data exchange is not licensed separately. It's something just we offer on top of what we already do. For the cloud and traffic insights, it's something that we're only going to be in a beta stage probably over the summer. We don't really have a commercial model in place for that yet.
I love that the first question is about the licensing. I would have a couple of questions. So first one is, previously we had the conversation about the Cloud Catalyst. So like, is this like, you obviously showed the integration with Meraki. Is this going to be integrated with ThousandEyes?
Yeah, so you mean in terms of Catalyst Center?
Yeah, Catalyst Center, yeah.
Yes, we're working with
Catalyst Center. What is it called? Cloud Catalyst? What we had the presentation before?
It's Catalyst Center.
It is, yeah.
So the aim is to bring this to the Catalyst Center as well.
Okay. And then the second question was about so you showed the integration with AWS and VPCs. Is there like integration with Azure as well?
That's something that we are currently planning, but I don't have anything more to share in terms of like the timelines.
Okay, and so what's going to be the focus from cloud? Like, are you going to be expanding as a priorities? Like, are you going to be expanding in AWS, like, monitoring more things in AWS? Or are you going to be focusing on like more public cloud providers?
So I think given the current customer feedback, it's actually going to be both. So we're going to be expanding the capabilities as well as supporting. We're working on supporting Azure. Given what we've spoken to customers, the two most popular hyperscalers tend to be AWS and Azure.
Mm-hmm. So no timelines or anything like that?
No timelines on Azure, unfortunately.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
What about the enterprise agents? I'm kind of going a little bit off in left field to some historical stuff, but last year, ThousandEyes was working on enterprise container agents on things like ARM and the like. Have those happened? They said soon, back in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
So we've focused a lot of our effort on containerization on Cisco platforms. Mm-hmm. To be honest, I don't have insight into ARM specifically, but we have been working on supporting this on as more platforms as possible. So there are, I think Cisco's iOS XE is also going to be running on ARM. So I think ARM support is kind of coming as a pack of that. But I don't know if that means just Cisco or does it mean general ARM support.
It would be really good to be able to put kind of tiny agents in places that maybe we're not using Cisco, still have some visibility.
So we are on the, specifically on the endpoint agents. So we're also seeing adoption on ARM on user devices. So we are working on ARM support for endpoint agents specifically.
Okay. A lot of the ones I'm doing are containerized.
You containerized. Okay, got it.
Having the containers is really handy there. Like, obviously, we could try and build the containers ourselves, but it would be nice if it was a pre-done.
Understood.
Thank you.